Hello and welcome to the Passing Through podcast. This is a special episode, so the format is going to be a little bit different than normal because I have an announcement to make. My partner Asha and I have founded a nonprofit organization here in Poland called The Living Bridge. And as listeners of this show may imagine, the focus of the organization centers around community building, ecology, insight practices, and recognizing the earth as animate. We believe that the root of our disconnection comes from our separation. And not just separation from one another, but ultimately from nature. To quote previous two-time guest, Robert Falconer, many thinkers from all sorts of fields have pointed to our separation and isolation as the underlying causes of our modern problems. It is this misconception of our minds and ourselves as impervious, private, and separate that underlies all these separations. The belief that our subjective experience is private and absolutely separate cuts us off at the root. It precludes deep belonging. A humanity bereft of belonging creates a chorus of crises, and you can hear them if you listen. Species die-off, habitat destruction, climate and ecological collapse, water scarcity, food insecurity, harmful pollutants in the air and in the soil, natural disasters, floods, fires, droughts. The planet is in chaos. Our nations are in chaos, and so too our communities are in chaos. We face crises in meaning, energy, mental health, economic and political crises, all of which threaten geopolitical stability and societal collapse. Yet, for many, there is no problem. Some newly elected leaders even go as far as to completely deny the urgency and severity of the reality we face. Structures of power, institutions, and other agents of coloniality have vested interests in keeping things moving along as they are in order to keep capital flowing. The cycle of mass consumption and mass production and the mass extraction, violence, and exploitation they're predicated on must continue until there is nothing left. Such is the insatiable hunger of modernity. So what do? The first step, we believe, is recognizing that there's a problem. This is a hard, painful first step because it requires us to see our complicity, our denials, our beloved world falling apart. With the monster under our beds, it's easier to pull up the blanket, shut our eyes, and pray for sleep to take us than it is to sit with the fear. Witnessing the monster, this time not under our beds, but one which has colonized our minds, our ways of thinking, knowing, and being, necessitates an ability to confront our inner demons, to process negative emotions, and to endure challenges collectively. We believe that we can only do this together. It's a process of connection through reconnecting all life. But to achieve this kind of collective shift, we require a space where we can come together and cultivate radical compassion for one another's existence. We believe care is a most potent antidote to fear and disconnection. And while we seek to critically examine our thoughts, actions, behaviors, and interpersonal dynamics, we strive to develop maturity, insight, discernment, and accountability. We aim to establish this container of care through an ecology of practice and action. But before I describe what I mean by this, I want to pause here for a moment because it's important to note that we don't have the answers. We just have ideas. I'm not here to tell you what's best for you or offer quick fixes or share simple solutions. I don't have all the skills or abilities needed to impart this knowledge to others. In fact, I'd be wary of and encourage others to be wary of those who claim that they do. We are fellow travelers passing through. We are searching too. I can tell you what we aim to try to do. We seek to hold space and build containers in which our collective capacity to reflect, to deepen relational awareness, and to sit with difficult emotions is expanded so that we may better metabolize trauma. And this happens through circles, through story, ultimately through risking, vulnerability, and grief and weakness. Scott Peck, founder of the community building method and the different drum, wrote, "It is bizarre that currently war seems to be the sole risk we are willing to take. The central problem of the arms race is not that we are risking too much, but rather far too little on behalf of peace. Our strategy needs to be far more complex and multidimensional than peace through strength. Specifically, we needed to pursue additionally, with at least equal vigor, the peace through weakness strategies that build community. Otherwise, there is no hope. For the reality is that there can be no vulnerability without risk, and there can be no community without vulnerability, and there can be no peace, ultimately no life, without community. So if you join us on this journey, you acknowledge it is risky. You realize that it is to venture into the very heart of the unknown. And we cannot promise you anything. We can only say that we think the journey will be worth it. And we want to approach this from a perspective of humility, as an exploration. Not as people who have answers, who are going to tell you how to do things or share what we know, but as co-collaborators, as co-creators in a community of leaders. And so I want to return to this phrase, ecology of practice, and explain what it is, why it matters, and what ours is. I'm not sure who first coined the term. It may have been John Vervaeke, but an ecology of practice can be thought of as a series of tools or skills which are all interconnected and produce a more round, more resilient whole. It's effectively a systems thinking approach to view things from a holistic vantage point instead of a specialized, fragmented one in which we lose sight of the forest for the trees. And so why is an ecology of practice useful? Well, because it affords us a perspective in which many seemingly different things can be seen as related, and it offers insights we might otherwise fail to see. I can give you an example. Let's say we have a patient with a host of health issues. Just like our planet fraught with crises, so is this person. The patient has heart palpitations, digestive issues, aching bones, cognitive impairment, and anxiety. She visits the doctor and is referred to a cardiologist, who proceeds to prescribe her beta blockers. Then she goes to an orthopedist for her joints, but the orthopedist refers her to a rheumatologist who recommends anti-inflammatory medications. Then she goes to a gastroenterologist who tells her that she has IBS and tells her to take proton pump inhibitors and supplement with some probiotics. She goes to a neurologist for her mental fog and her dizziness, but she gets no answer. Her conditions worsen and she goes to a psychologist for her mounting stress and panic. And what does the psychologist do? Prescribes her antidepressants, and she gets even worse. What's happening in this story? Each of these specialists, though well-intentioned, looks at her symptoms from a narrow, specialized perspective and finds a different fault. But none of them seem to have actually uncovered what's really wrong. That is, until she visits an integrative holistic health practitioner who looks at her situation and discovers her issue is systemic, that what she actually has is chronic Lyme disease. So having a diverse ecology of practice enables us to see how all of these seemingly separate issues are actually interconnected, right? And so what are the practices that we think are important here? You can think of them in terms of three general categories: self, community, and nature. And moving from each category to the next signals an expansion in relationship and connection as we move from self to community to nature, with nature being the most expansive set of relationships and connections. This, to me, is the very foundation of ecology. Nature is our default community. Now, those three areas, self, community, and nature, I mentioned are the general areas. You might be asking yourself, what are the specific pieces of this ecology? And the list is evolving. It's subject to change. But right now, they're community building, permaculture, insight practices, and animism. And for someone who may just be tuning in to this podcast, this is a very unique episode to tune into. But let's assume that you're unfamiliar with any of these topics. Community building, in this case, is the bedrock of all ecology and of ours. Because how well we build community with ourselves, with each other, and the world around us ultimately dictates how well life is able to flourish. It is effectively a measure of health. Permaculture, it's a design philosophy which sees the earth as sacred instead of as servant. It doesn't concern itself with sustainability based on human needs, but on the needs of the entire ecosystem from a holistic perspective. Through regeneration, reciprocity, restoration, and honorable harvests, humans can rebuild healthy community with nature. Animism is the oldest human wisdom tradition. Animism sees the earth as alive and sensuous, shimmering with spirit and agency. It says the world is moved by unseen forces, energies, forgotten gods, and a whole host of human and non-human persons. It sees rivers and mountains and wind as alive. The morning mist wraps itself with agency against stoic mountainsides, cut ragged by the razor-sharp teeth of ancient glaciers. And as far as insight practices go, by fusing mindfulness practices like Buddhist insight meditation techniques and psychotherapeutic modalities like internal family systems, we can get to know the parts that make us who we are. And by knowing our parts, we can better build community with them, and in turn, with those around us. And so those are the pieces of the ecology right now, but we already sense that there are others emerging. There is something creative, something imaginal, something that's more somatic, based in movement, based in expression, that wants to be a part of this ecology. And we're discovering that as we go. It too is alive. And so what's the goal of all of this, you might be asking? Well, the goal, if there is a goal, is connecting all life. It's a movement away from separation towards integration as we walk each other home to wholeness. It's a movement towards a different future, a future in a state of becoming, in a state of emergence. And in the spirit of emergence, we aim to be the change that we seek in the world. So all of our offerings will be donation-based and free of charge. We'd like to do what we can to step outside of structures of exploitation and economies of violence and extraction by participating instead in economies based on gifting, rooting into reciprocity and growing in gratitude. And before I close out here, I just want to say one more time that we don't claim to have the answers. We are on this journey just as much as you are. We have just decided that we want to bring people with us on this journey. It would be like a bunch of people wanting to form a scouting team to see what else is out there, to push out into the horizon and explore and meet new people, meet new places, meet new ways of being, new cultures that are also waiting to meet us. And so you can come with us if any of this sounds good to you. And if you want to join us or you want to support us or you want to come along, you can find us at our website, thelivingbridge.earth. It's still being iterated on and evolved, but there's already a bunch of content there, some events, and soon there will be articles and podcasts like these. So if this is something that you're interested in getting involved in, please don't hesitate to send us an email at info@thelivingbridge.earth. You can also follow us on social media. The links for all of that stuff will be in our show notes. And I just wanted to take a moment to express something a little more human after reading a lot of these words from the page here, and just say that this is something that's really exciting for us. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And it doesn't really feel like something we chose, but more like something that chose us. And there's a saying or a phrase that's been in my mind over the last few days, which is that when you're ready, the teacher will find you. I don't know which tradition that comes from, if it's from Buddhism or if it's a Zen koan or where it comes from, but it seems as though we have entered into some sort of channel, some sort of river or current that's just carrying us on a journey if we will surrender to it and open ourselves to it and see where it takes us. And that is a different kind of learning. It's a deeper learning. It's one that's steeped in mystery and probably involves a good deal of unlearning. So stay tuned for more on all of this. I just wanted to share some of what's been going on, give folks the ability to check in, read, connect, get involved in events, and just start to breathe life into this project. So thanks for listening. As always, be good to one another. And I'll be back next week.